Hello and welcome to our special broadcast today of the Monetary Policy Committee decisions. Quite a lot has happened within the last few months in the monetary and fiscal space. We'll discuss all of this and more in today's MPC decision day in Nigeria. I'm Kenneth Bomo, coming live from our studio here in Lagos. Across the globe, central banks are recalibrating following the 25 basis point rate cut by the U.S. Federal Reserve recently, marking its first reduction since December as inflation shows signs of cooling. Coming back home to Nigeria, it's been 5 consecutive months of inflation slowdown. The Naira has seen relative stability, and to top it all, Nigeria's economy recorded a 4.23% growth in the second quarter of 2025. At the last meetings, Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee kept rates unchanged at 27.5%. Meanwhile, in Ghana, it's been a cumulative 650 basis point rate cut over 2 meetings as the Bank of Ghana cut its key rate by a record 350 basis points to 21.5%. On the flip side, South Africa's Reserve Bank held rates just like the Central Bank of West African states, which kept rates unchanged, citing lower inflation and higher GDP growth. On this special broadcast, we'll find out which way for Nigeria's analyst consensus are split. Some calling for a modest cut to between 50 to 100 basis points. Others believe that the MPC will hold on for a little longer. As we await the decision from the CBN Governor Olayemi Cardoso in Abuja, I'm joined in the studio by Bismarck Rewane, the CEO of Financial Derivatives, and Nnamdi Nwizu, the co-managing partner at Commercial Partners. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. And let's get straight into the decision today. Bismarck, let me get your take on what we can expect today. A hold, a cut? What would it be for you?
I think a cut. And I say cut of 25 basis points because the U.S. cut by 25 basis points. So if you want to maintain the interest rate inflation differential, you do the same so that the FPIs will not be discouraged coming in. But if maybe aggressively they go to 50 basis points, but generally speaking, on the low side, 25, on the high side, maybe 50.
Nnamdi?
Well, I think a more aggressive cut. I'm expecting maybe by 100 basis points. If you look at the fact that inflation has come down, we've seen the central bank reluctant to issue OMO bills, over the last 3 or 4 weeks. They've left excess liquidity in the system. And my thinking is that there's a reason for that. Maybe possibly looking at how they can reduce their cost of liquidity management. So I think you might possibly see a 100 basis points cut and possibly even have them tinker a little bit with the corridor to basically reduce, the cost of taking banks or the rate at which banks can place funds with the central bank.
Because I'd love to get your take quickly on that, because Bismarck mentioned something quite critical. The FPI strategy has been very pivotal in terms of how the CBN has been managing its the markets here. But let me get your take on how you think that would tinker if anything happens to it.
I mean, I think it's a risk, yes, but we've still seen them coming in droves despite central bank not issuing new OMO bills. We know there's been quite a bit of pressure. We've heard them, asking the central bank when next they're going to have an OMO auction, what's happening. Despite that, they're still coming in. So even if we were to do some layman type economics, and I say, look, okay, so the Fed was at what, about 4.755, and we were at 27.5. If you do 25 basis points, for to do a ratio, I should be expecting at least 100 in my own view to try and counter that versus, 25 basis points for me, a low cut is almost insignificant, might as well not do anything. Unless the rhetoric changes and they say, look, we are doing a small cut just to signify, what we want to do, and then by next MPC meeting, we'll start to go a lot more aggressively. But if I look at what's happened in Ghana this year, 650 basis points. If you look at Egypt, they've done 500. Look at South Africa, they've done 75 basis points from 7.75 to 7. So you're talking about about 15% cut. I know economies are not the same, but still we are seeing other African countries start to cut, and they all have pretty similar dynamics, trying to attract foreign investors, and they've not done so badly despite the cuts. Yes, 1 or 2 of them have seen some slight depreciation in their currency after the cuts, but largely been stable, and they've been able to manage it. If Ghana can do 650 basis points coming out from debt restructuring, right, then I don't see why we can't start to reduce our rates.
All right, let's take a much broader look at the reform trajectory we're seeing here. 2 years since Cardoso came in as CBN governor, came in on the 15th of September, if I remember precisely. And I'd just love to get your reform scorecard. Let's start first with the monetary and price stability and what we're seeing play out so far. Bismarck?
Well, I think came in September 2024, right? September 2023. Now, it didn't do anything until February 2024. So basically, understanding the lay of the land. And then it took steps, and we did cumulative 8.75 increases, and that was able to bring inflation down, and also able to restore the currency to stability. And so the currency was a major culprit in terms of fueling inflation. So once you got a hold of the currency, then you also increase interest rates so that the marginal propensity to consume actually reduces, and that was able to stabilize things. It took a couple of months before we started seeing a point of inflection. So the point is that point of inflection now stable enough for you to take a dip, into the deep end of the pool? I think that knowing the people in the MPC the way I know them, they will be more cautious, right? Because there's fiscal dominance versus central bank autonomy. So the central bank autonomy is there, and nobody is interfering with that. The gross reserves are $42 billion. If you drop it too fast, and let us say there's $13.5 billion of FPI. Yeah. Let us say because the rate drops sharply, you lose half of those, right? So you're talking about almost 6 out of the 42. So you go to about 30. Well, it's not going to happen overnight, but that could change things a little bit. So my guess is that they will dip their toes into the pool, look at it, and then if it doesn't shake anything, then they will do more, but not aggressively.
Nnamdi, on the reform scorecard here, 2 years of Olayemi Cardoso, for you, what has been the major points in terms of monetary and price stability?
I'll say he's done a great job. It's been a breath of fresh air. First thing I would give him huge credit for is restoring people's confidence in the central bank. You can't take anything away from him when it comes to that. And that has been extremely important in seeing a lot of the reforms work. It's been key to see the foreign investors coming back into the country. People now have a lot more faith in the currency. When people meet me, if you had met me 2 years ago and said, I want to invest, should I do USD or NGN? I would say, please do USD. The last 4, 5 months, 6 months, I've said do NGN. With the high rates, I don't see the currency depreciating, based on on reforms that have, started. And based on that, it makes more sense to be Naira, which is the message that central bank, or which is what central bank have been trying to achieve, which means their reforms, to a large extent, are working. And then on the fiscal side, we're seeing quite a number of changes coming through. We're seeing huge changes on tax. So I expect you're going to see huge tax revenues coming in next year, where even the upper class in Nigeria, who typically pay very little, most likely have to start paying a lot more when it comes to taxes. So I think from a central bank perspective, the days of mispriced CBN swaps, they've ended. The days of unorthodox type monetary policy have ended. So they've done quite a lot. And the fact that they even cleared the backlog, they looked at there's some volume, I think about 2 billion or so, they didn't sell. They explained why they didn't do it. So quite a bit of transparency, around that. So I think they've done very well when it comes to reforms.
All right, Bismarck, let's get to external reserves. How that has been managed. We're seeing it at 6-year high for $2 billion right now. Your take on what we've seen play out in terms of how we manage that?
Part of it is the FPI, which is the hot money, right? And then a critical mass at the bottom. So if let us say we take 10 out of it, so instead of 42, we have 32. 32 still gives you a cover. So, but I think the alignment of fiscal and monetary policy is more important than the goals. Right? So what have we seen? We've seen a better tax to GDP ratio. We've seen the GDP get into the growth trajectory of 4.2, which is the highest in 4 years. We've seen reverse taxes, in other words, subsidies that have been eliminated, and therefore the money comes to the federal government and state governments. Now the big thing is that what have you done with it in terms of recycling it in such a way that it has a multiplier effect? That has not begun to play out really well yet, but things are happening. So when you see that in the GDP numbers that came out, 35 of the 42 activities expanded, that's 66%. And the activities that expanded are those that employ a lot of people. Yeah. So what you see is growth, followed by the lagging indicator, which is employment, right? We don't have reliable unemployment numbers, so we just have to guess with it. But the growth numbers are pretty, we can rely on those post-rebasing. The inflation numbers post-reconstitution of the basket. And then we now begin to see the currency value, kind of moderate. And we've seen, quite frankly, we've seen a reduction in the price of petrol, which is a major issue. So when you look at 2023, which was a disaster year, 2024 was really bad, but 2025 has been a point of inflection. And we are beginning to see that. And the government has to now ask itself, how do we convert those gains into a Marshall Plan where people can benefit from it across different segments of their society?
Another key area has been the issue around the financial system soundness. What has happened in the banks. We've seen the recapitalization drive come up there. The deadline, March 2026, we've seen quite a number of banks now meeting the requirements here. About 6 of the 13 banks so far have met that. Nnamdi, let me get your take on what we've seen play out in terms of the reforms in the banking sector.
Well, I think it's been good. It was an odd way to, sort of strip out capital that qualified, right? Because what message also sent sort of some of the banks will be, look, there's no need building capital over the years. We should have been paying out your money in dividends, right? Rather than building a huge buffer and suddenly you say it's not enough, right? But I think part of it was to possibly get people to bring home some dollars, get foreign investors to come in, get Nigerians who had dollars offshore, convert them to now come and invest in the banks, right? It will be interesting to see how it plays out in other sectors, insurance and co, who are all doing their own capitalization. It will be interesting to see how it plays out. I think the only concern that some of us have will be if the banks can churn out numbers to justify the increase in share price that we've seen, right? Because you've seen, it was a bit odd that despite having capital raise and issuing new shares, we saw a lot of bank shares move up, 30, 40%. Ideally, when you have more supply, right, your price should either stay flat or come down, but we've seen a huge appreciation, and we've started seeing banking numbers come out, right? And it hasn't been pretty. GTB just released theirs today, and it's almost, a 50% drop in their PBT. We've seen the same happen with, I believe, Zenith. I think UBA has released. So suddenly we have new share, capital has been raised, share price for some of them have most practically doubled. More your revenue is dropping by 50%. So they need to now put the new capital to work. And if the central bank does start to cut rates, then that sort of reduces the returns they can even get on the new capital that they've just raised. So interesting to see how it pans out. But one thing we know is that you have banks with bigger balance sheets or bigger shareholders' funds, which definitely makes them, a lot sounder, and it means that it can increase their one-obligor limits, lending limits to, various sectors and co, which is good for, growth of the economy.
All right, so banks need to put the new capital to work. Key message there. But Bismarck, priorities for the next 2 years?
Priorities for the next 2 years is actually a stable currency. The external imbalances reduce those significantly, and make sure that the unbalanced growth theory in terms of the sectors that will grow, that have linkages that can pull the others along with it, those are the key things that will happen. Less fiscal dominance, more of monetary policy autonomy, and allowing, again, a stable currency and moderating inflation. If that happens, I think the economy can coast along all the way till after the elections.
Nnamdi, your take as well?
Largely agree with him. It will be interesting to see how the reforms take shape over the next couple of years. A big question will be what happens to all the funds that they start to raise. So if you increase taxes and your tax revenue shoots up aggressively, you shouldn't have your debt also shooting up aggressively, because we've seen a huge jump in the debt profile despite increased tax collection. Question around what's happening with all the monies that you're bringing in, that you're still borrowing aggressively. So it will be good to see a huge jump in revenue, reduced borrowing, and at the same time start to see a lot of projects start to happen that would